a bid to cover an expected revenue shortfall, sending clear signals that the country may be running into debt crisis headwinds. This comes exactly 5 months after the International Monetary Fund, IMF, raised Kenya's debt risk from moderate to high. Kenya's debt stood at 61.7% of GDP at the end of 2019, up from 50.2% at the end of 2015. What will those figures look like at the close of 2020? Plus, are the country's debt-driven development projects going to break even in time to relieve a looming debt distress?
Over the last 1 year, when we borrow concessionally, and we borrow from the multilateral and friendly bilateral countries. Whether most of the time the interest rate is at 1%, with a longer repayment period of even up to 30 years. This is really important because in a situation that we are being faced with at the moment, with to some extent revenue falling behind our projections, and given the challenge of COVID and the desire to continue maintaining highest standard of service to the Kenyan people, we, as a responsible country, we have the leeway to borrow. And Kenya has never defaulted on any loan. In history, Kenya has never defaulted. Our friends will tell you, all countries, how do you develop? When you have good, ambitious plans and projects that you want to realize more development within a very short time, you also borrow to deliver better services, to achieve and spur economic growth of the country.
All right, Treasury Cabinet Secretary there, Okoa Uchumi, just reassuring the country that we have never defaulted on any of the loans and the government remains steadfast in managing its debt situation. And our question on this forum, we are asking you, do you think Kenya's debt burden is still sustainable? That is our tweetable question. And so far, I can get your feedback coming in thick and fast. And allow me to quickly take a look at some of your feedback, and then we can re-engage with our panelists just to also just get their perspective on this. So far, from those who have polled in, about 14.8% are saying no, that our debt burden is still sustainable. Actually, 85.2% have said no, our debt is not sustainable. 14.8% of you are saying, yes, our debt is sustainable. Well, a comment here from Stephen at Stevens is saying it's becoming unsustainable when we started to borrow to steal and taking on a lot of unfeasible white elephant projects. Another comment here from Dan Shamala saying the more debt, the more unsustainable. That's the fact to we Kenyans. Well, another Kenyan, John Daniel, saying, I don't care. Whereas another one, Musiri Robai, saying Kenya's debt is not sustainable. It's ridiculous. That's why the economy is stagnant and we are all suffering from high taxes, unemployment, and everything else. And last comment here from Yusuf Omar saying, kama wenye wanatukopesha hawa complain, sisi ni kina nani tuseme it's not sustainable. Very heavy issues coming out of our very important subject. Let me bring in Mr. Wanyama. Would you like to quickly react to this?
Sorry, it was very interesting to listen to that clip by the minister, because listening to him, I would say that was a very, very slick speech, very PR-ish, because what he tells us is the loans they have taken in the past 1 year. The means or the style of taking debt should be considered from about 2014 to 2018, where we took a lot of commercial loans. Commercial loans are different from what are concessional loans, which he was talking about, that have been taken in the past 1 year. Concessional loans are paid over a much longer period of time, as opposed to commercial loans, such as the Eurobond. Now, because these are commercial, the payment is much higher than the normal concessional loans. I think at somewhat like 6 or 7%. Maybe James will kind of clarify that, as opposed to the 1% that he's talking about. But these are loans that, because of their payment structure, the pressure is on the government much faster. Last year, if I'm not wrong, or the year before, that's when we were paying a huge chunk of debt from, I believe that was the first Eurobond. So this is why the pressure is on the citizens, and it's immediately on the citizens, because the government has to look at all manner of ways to collect revenue and pay back to these commercial lenders, who are much different from the multilateral lenders, the IMFs of this world, the World Bank. These are directly from banks, and so the pressure is going to shift to the citizen. And this is something that we try to address in our advocacy, in terms of how we say that because of the pressures that are coming with debt, a lot of the tax burden is shifted on the citizen, especially because of the commitments we've made in relation to these loans. There's still a lot we don't know about the terms of these commercial loans. And this is where we come in to say, for instance, show us whom you have signed these loans with, and how much of these loans are actually commercial as opposed to concessional, and then what is the total debt portfolio that we have. So for me, I found that speech to be very slick, one probably just to assuage the markets, but on a day-to-day, every citizen can tell you that the strain is felt directly in their pocket.
Mr. Muraguri, I'd like to hear your thoughts as well. Kindly, you can unmute yourself.
I want to say, to a greater extent, I agree with the minister's statement. There is no way Kenya is going to default to the lenders, because we are still collecting revenue. And if you look at this year, for example, the financial year 2019-2020, just around 600 billion was spent on paying the lenders. We collected 1.5 trillion. But the critical thing to ask ourselves, for example, is who are we defaulting to? First of all, we have defaulted on the citizens. Forget about the numbers that we are giving out there. When you don't deliver services, you have defaulted the social contract. The first the contract is with the citizens who put you in those offices. Because there is no government officer who puts himself in that office. And, we agree. They are citizens and we live with them here. But first of all, you have to agree, have we defaulted to the citizens before we even start talking about defaulting to the markets? Because we are collecting money. And we have defaulted. We have businesses who are going for months and years, paying bills. They have not been paid. And those are people who've taken loans. You get auctioned, people committing suicide, for example. And that's the way you need to look at default level for debt in a country before you go to the numbers. Because at the end of the day, even if the economy becomes junk, like Zimbabwe, life is still going on for politicians in Zimbabwe, just to quote, a practical example. Inflation is overshooting, but life is going on. But for citizens, service delivery is pathetic. It's zero.
Sure.
People living miserable lives.
With
so I agree
hyperinflation
with the minister. We are not going to default. We're still going, but we will not deliver services. We will default. The opportunity cost is that citizens will miss on service delivery.
Interesting thoughts there. And I'd like to hear Madam Irene Otieno to also just give us your perspectives. What are some of the options that we have? Because on one hand, the government has to raise taxes, get money from the citizens so that they can fund their development and recurrent expenditure. At the same time, we're actually pushing for a level playing field where we're saying we should not overborrow. At the same time, people want services.
True. Just listening into what the CS was talking about, I think we really must unpack what sustainability is. So I think we have two different understandings of what sustainability is to the political class and what sustainability is to the person paying for those debts and other expenditures of this government. Because from our end, I think the assumption should be sustainability should be that the debts we take on should be able to easily repay themselves, or rather they should be able to spur some level of economic growth in the country that then you don't have to revert to additional taxes to then offset that debt. So for me, that is the meaning of sustainability, and I think the CS is missing it. Because if the debts were sustainable, you would then hold constant the type of taxes that you then are bringing in, and say even if the taxes are at the level they were at, the amount that we have put into the economy should have an output. That does not mean, because then you're paying this thing twice. We are paying for those repayment, and you're burdening the citizens. And the other message that I would want to give Treasury and the political class is that this thing is sustainable, quote in quotes, for them, because the citizens continue to pay. If the citizen were not to pay their taxes, then it is something that citizens can do, because we then have tax evasion and we have tax avoidance. We close our shops at county level. Where will these county governments and national government get the revenue? So the citizens by themselves are really doing their patriotic role. We have agreed that we will pay our fair share of tax, but the application of that tax is what is the problem. So mine is to probably tell the political class, and particularly the CS, not to sit pretty. Citizens can devise ways not to pay, and as you can already see, the revenue has been dipping. So even the collection itself has not been, as they anticipated. And for me, if we do not address the corruption, we do not address these debts that are not profiting citizens, then it can only get worse for Kenya Revenue Authority. Remember, Abby, I think this is what the KRA calls the taxpayer month, where they're trying to motivate taxpayers who pay a lot. You see, the people should really be motivated at the small me and you who are paying to BAT, who are paying to Safaricom. So Safaricom and BAT are just collection points of what me and you pay when we are purchasing those products. So when we choose not to use some of these things, when we choose not to pay tax and avoid it, then they, as they are saying that they have not defaulted, they will surely default. So I think the message is very clear that the taxes that citizens pay must be applied well. There must be a rationale that we see where these projects are going. And allow me to belabor this for a few minutes. So again, is that these governments and the government entities are not speaking one to another. So when Treasury says that the debts are sustainable, the Office of the Auditor General recently shared the special audit on COVID-19. If you look at the findings therein, it already shows you even the money that we have gotten in wave 1 of COVID-19 has not been applied lawfully and efficiently. So as Kenya is seeking more funding from the donors, then we should be able to be told, how have we mitigated the issues that the Auditor General has laid bare in the report on COVID-19 wave 1, and how do we safeguard whatever amounts of money we'll be getting as we move to wave 2. Remember the audit report for the Eurobond. Also, it was very clear, the Auditor General says, there is no list of the projects that these funds was applied to. So the issues there, even when we talk about sustainability, I would say the government has prioritized its lenders over and above their role, and their role to the citizens. And for me, it should be the other way around, because your citizens are the ones that move your economy. You rely on them paying taxes, not to default. So when you miss the point and you reprioritize the other way, I think there's a big problem there, and it should be addressed.
And Madam Irene, just to stay with you, I'd like to pick your mind when it comes to tax avoidance and tax evasion. How rampant is it, and what are some of the dangers of us going down that path?
So tax avoidance is, let me start with the tax avoidance, and Leonard being here can also see this. So tax avoidance has been there a lot because particularly the corporates are taking advantage of loopholes that are in the system. So we feel as an institution, one, that the government is very keen on the small taxpayers, but there are avenues where government is missing significant sources of funding, and that is where the corporates are avoiding tax, so just maximizing the legal loopholes. So for the corporates and the multinationals, I would say that the international taxing rules kind of facilitate them avoiding, which you as a nation, and I guess the African states, are the ones that must tighten their legal frameworks then to ensure that they reap or show up the domestic resource mobilization. But for me and the rest of Kenyans, it's very easy for us we have to comply. Really, if you're in formal employment, your employer must, as of right, deduct the pay as you earn before it even reaches your pocket. So then I would say the avenues for me to avoid tax are very limited. But people are starting to maximize it, particularly both small business people, because you're really not getting services. Why would you pay tax, Abby? And you are paying tax, but you have to pay a private water vendor to supply water to your hotel. You have to look, we as citizens have to pay different public toilets to use a toilet because government has not prioritized public services. And Abby, just going out of your question a bit, is to mention that even the strategies government is trying to implement right now are very reactive. We are trying to sort the state of healthcare right now and sanitation, while we have over the years not prioritized the state of public services. And I think that is a huge problem. So government is progressively moving towards public-private partnerships. So when you have more private players, we accept the role of private players, but when you're looking at the issues of equity, how many private players would go to Turkana to put up clinics? So if you kill the public health infrastructure, where do these citizens that are paying their rightful share of tax, where are they going? So do they pay tax, Abby, and they then have to pay a private person who has not even invested in Turkana? So this current situation, and as we are talking about debt, for me, the route we have taken, where we have taken on so much debt, continues to deny us as a nation opportunity to invest in strengthened public services, which is the easiest even when you're looking at shocks like COVID-19. You cannot compel a private player, like when we're looking at the housing sector, where the government is trying to say, we will put this tax, we will reduce the rental tax that should be paid by private housing players, and we hope it will trickle down to the citizens. Put out a poll and ask how many citizens have been able to benefit from that fiscal strategy that government put. Very few. So it then means that government is only in control of public sector, which they have over the years disregarded, and I think that we are suffering the consequences now.
Interesting. And Madam Wanjiru Gikonyo, you did mention earlier that we have a political problem, and of course the citizens are part of the political infrastructure of the social fabric of the country. Do you feel we've had accountability in our debt? How transparent have we been? And as the coalition of Okoa Uchumi Coalition, what are some of the proposals you're putting on the table in terms of turning around the tide?
Thank you so much. And I feel, I just want to repeat that statement that James said, that government has defaulted on the citizens. And they've not only defaulted in terms of the taxes that, Leonard and Irene have spoken about, that are then falling on citizens at the expense of maybe big businesses or private foreign investors. And Leonard, speaks quite a lot about the kind of trade deals that government is taking to attract foreign investment and then putting the burden on citizens. But beyond that, we have the issue of, again, accountability as provided in the Constitution, access to information as provided in the institution. And one of the most basic documents for debt is the debt register. And the debt register is supposed to give a list of the debts. It's supposed to talk about the cost of the debt, give all the details that are required when it's due and all of that. It should also give an indication of where the money has been applied. So there are lots of loopholes. There is some information that government is publishing, but for instance, it's supposed to do an annual debt report. When we were checking and preparing, we found that that is not up to date. The debt register also not up to date. Quarterly reports that are required in the public finance management not being prepared. And then also, crucially, missing details, especially around the contracts and the agreements between, what did government really put up in terms of collateral? What are the fine details? So we have a figure that so much is owed to China for to the Exim Bank for the SGR. But we don't know the fine details of that agreement. So we are finding, and there was a very good report prepared by AFRICOG, and they've done another one actually being launched tomorrow on the issue of state capture, where they said that and the Auditor General spoke during the launch of that report, and he said corruption has been put in the budget. And this budget-led corruption is able to work within the legal process and manipulate it, undermine it in such a way that corruption is able to seep through. And part of that is because there's a lack of transparency. And the problem when the minister says that they are now going to refinance the debt, get cheaper debt to pay off the more expensive debt, it doesn't overcome or negate the reality that that debt, part of it was procured at exorbitant rates. For instance, with SGR, the rates that was given was initially, became almost 4 times, especially the cost of laying the track when we compare to Ethiopia, got a similar train. In fact, theirs is electrical. Ours runs on diesel. And their cost was 1/4 the cost of ours. So where is that difference? That difference is going into people's pockets through, World Bank is very polite, they call it inefficiency, but really it's corruption. The other thing I'd like to say is that somebody there said IFIs, World Bank is okay with this, so even us, we are okay. But what has happened is we've seen that with China coming in, China came in and they've been lending to African countries. And China was not demanding accountability, transparency, the good governance. For them, they just want to get the money because they have a global agenda. So we've seen the multilaterals, the World Banks. We've also seen some of the bilaterals. Other lenders that normally would demand governance are not demanding governance and have set up their own kind of commercial development companies to advise countries in Africa. Now, if American finance institutions want to make profits and investing in Africa is profitable, and they come to the government of Kenya, as happened with the Eurobond, as happened with SGR, it also happened in Zambia. And, Kenya wants to borrow, let's say, the Eurobond initially was supposed to be 500 million. And in the end, the figure was 2.8 billion because the money was available. So the problem is, especially with the commercial lending, and we are also seeing a loosening of the restrictions around the bilateral lending, is that the advisor of our development projects is also the one giving us the money, and then we have a parliament that is rubber stamping everything the executive says. So there is a gravy train there that really is going to fall on us because we are the ones to pay. So as Okoa Uchumi, one of the things that we seek to do is we are asking for the information, but also we want to ensure that Kenyans are then not ladled with debt that is odious, that is due to corruption.
All right. And we've mentioned the word citizens severally, and I'd like us to listen in on what Kenyans have to say when it comes to this matter of debt. And we did speak to a couple of Kenyans, and let's hear them out.
Hiyo madeni tunachukua, mimi naona kama itakuja kutuumiza baadaye. Juu sasa tukizidi kuchukua madeni, tunazidi yani kuumia sisi wa Kenya wadogo. Juu sasa naona sisi ndio inabidi tunatoa taksi ndio tulipe madeni.
Wakenya ikisimamiwa na Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, rais wetu, wafanye bidii ili wamalize ile deni yenye libaki. Hata kama watatafuta njia nyingine, hata kama watafanya nini, lakini watafute juu chini wamalize ile mkopo ingine, ili wale wenye watakuja kesho wasibaki kwa kipata eti deni nyingine ilibaki nyuma. Ili wakizaliwa hata kama wale wenye watazaliwa kesho wakute kama Kenya haina deni na lakini maendeleo ya Kenya iwe inaendelea salama. Sasa kuhusu mambo ya saa hii, Uhuru na Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga wakae chini na deputy president, hao watatu wakiongea na watafute njia juu. Najua Kenya iko na pesa zaidi yenye ziko kando zenye zinaenda upande wa corruption, lakini wazuie hizo za corruption. na hizo pesa zenye zinaenda upande ya corruption wajumulise pamoja na walipe deni ya China, ndio hata tena siku nyingine wanaweza kubaliwa wakope tena mambo mengine.
Kama ni ya kujenga inchi ni sawa, lakini kama ni ya kukuja hapa kwa inchi alafu unapata watu kadhaa ndio wanachukua wanajigawia, hiyo sioni ikisaidia. Nitasema kama ni ya kujenga inchi ni sawa, sina shida nayo, lakini kama ni ya watu kwa mfuko, hiyo inaweza kuwa shida. Naweza sema kama ni kuitisha, wanaitisha, kama ni kukopa, wanakopa, alafu wanajua venye watazicontrol, unaona? Wanaweka board fulani ya control hiyo loan. Inaweza kuwa inasaidia pia.
Well, clearly mixed reactions from Kenyans. There are those for debt, there are those against the current debt situation in the country. And on this forum, we are seeking to get a very balanced conversation around the options for balanced and equitable budgets in a time when the Kenyan government is facing a debt distress situation. Well, when we come back, I'll be getting reactions from my panelists as we allow them to absorb what Kenyans have to say. And our hashtag for this conversation is KTN News Special. And you can tweet us at KTN News KE. You can also tweet me at Agina Abi. And we'll be able to sample your views after this quick commercial break.
This is KTN News.